Und damit ein herzliches Willkommen und Hallo. Es geht immer weiter und weiter und weiter. Ich bin es Mafix und der Foreign God. You Olga, Marisbury Amnusfer, keine Ahnung was. Marisbury Amnusfer, verzeihung, sehr Vater. Zumindestens You Olga, B7 ist hinabgestiegen beim letzten Mal. Der siebte Gott, die siebte Bestie und der Foreign God, der die Crypter ausgesandt hat, der die Menschheit zerstören will und das König regieren will. Wir wissen noch nicht, wieso sie die Körper hat von Mary, die ja eigentlich ganz, ganz lange zurückhängen, schon in dem ersten Singularität gestorben ist. Doch das interessiert uns jetzt erstmal nicht. Das Monster ist hinabgestiegen und am Ende unserer Kräfte haben wir natürlich keine Chance, es zu bezwingen. Doch ein Mann, der Göttern ebenbürtig ist, stellt sich dem Monster in den Weg und kann uns hoffentlich die Minuten schenken, damit wir hier entfliehen können. Woodime nutzt seine letzten Kräfte in Sektion 25. Something one is not born with. Seine Kräfte, um hier den Aliengott zumindest für eine kurze Zeit zurückzuschlagen, damit er sich nicht komplett manifestieren kann und wir entkommen können. Der Name ist awesome, Mann! What I'm about to tell you took place in the spring when I was 15 years old. Okay, wir hören wieder seine Vergangenheit. Das ist damals die Geschichte, wo sein Vater versucht hat, ihn umzubringen und der wahrscheinlich in dieser einen Kammer dann war. Back then, I thought the future was bright and full of hope. I was born into an environment far better than most could hope for, with talents far greater than most could dream of. I knew I was destined for great things, and that my purpose was to see them done. I'm going to create something beautiful. I'm going to create something wonderful. It was that ideal, that passion, that made me apply myself to my studies day in and day out. And as a result... Und jetzt ist die Frage natürlich, wer ihn dann aufgefischt hat. I ended up in this filthy dump. I found myself in a place that would never give rise to ideas or principles of any sort. The pain in my chest made me gasp. I couldn't move my limbs at all, but fortunately I was still able to treat the wound on my chest. Since I had been chosen to take over the family in lieu of my father, I possessed a magical crest that had been reinforced over 11 generations. It was designed to heal its bearer in the event they suffered an injury, even if they could not do so themselves. But... now the crest was no longer functioning, its mana was stagnant, and the anecdotes from the curses department. I knew it must have been poisoned with an anti-mage toxin, one designed to attack its target's nerves and blood. Enough time has passed for the toxin to work through my body. Both my crest and circuits were completely dead. I could no longer counteract the toxin myself. I would require assistance. The situation couldn't have been worse. I was trapped in enemy territory, and the strength I had was fading fast. The only hope I had of surviving was if my grandfather noticed something amiss and sent someone to rescue me. The problem was, I had no way of knowing if I would last that long. Awake, awake, awake! Especially with more of my father's assassins looking for me. I felt as though the basement rooms already punch-drenched had suddenly gotten even worse. The boy was wearing a coat that someone else had clearly thrown away, and his hair hadn't been washed in years. He must have carried me here to where he lived when they found me crawling through that alley after the attempt on my life. I could only guess he thought he could make money off me based on my clothes and appearance. Still alive? Hearing the boy digging through a full can of garbage, I was unable to hide my disgust. I was deeply ashamed by the fact that such a pitiful creature had saved my life. Treasure! Here, eat! The boy pressed a piece of completely stale, moldy bread up to my mouth and forced me to eat it, wiping the crumbs off my face with his filthy sleeves. Whatever his intent, his efforts were far from helpful. My wound had closed, but my digestive system was only barely working. Rather than helping my recovering instinct, eating barely edible food like this would only upset my stomach and make my condition worse. It's good, eat! But I lacked both the strength to resist and the energy to refuse. so I reluctantly opened my mouth and choked down the rock-hard bread. Once I managed to finish the food he forced upon me, the boy stepped away from my bed with a satisfied smile. He then moved to a corner of the room, where he sat down cross-legged and continued his unsettling laugh. Now I was wrecked with both chest pain and shame about the predicament I found myself in. I realized there was nothing I could do, so I simply lay back and closed my eyes. This would all be over in a few hours anyway. My silent has almost surely a mage, and so it would be trivial for them to track me down. It was only a matter of time until they discovered this place and came to finish me off while I was still incapacitated. Any help that might be on its way would never get here in time. Not even a god could rescue me from the situation. But my silence never showed, even after several days had passed. I think I must have spent about 10 days so on the hard wooden bed without ever getting up. My body was still paralyzed, but by that point I must have gotten accustomed to the environment. Slowly but surely I took stock of my current situation. Here, eat this too. No thanks. Could I have some water instead? The fact that this shed was located under a bridge was the one silver lining. Thanks to that we had access to potable water, even if it wasn't entirely clean. That's better. So how long have you been living here? Never mind, eat. My best guess is the boy had been living here since he lost his guardian several years ago. This shed, his home, must have belonged to his guardian. Even now I do not know if his parents abandoned him or whether he was an orphan from birth. He had very little in the way of language skills. This was hardly surprising, given that he could only have had a single real conversation with an adult in his life. What's your name? Surely you must have known that much. I was shocked. I couldn't believe there was a child in this day and age, in a modern city no less, who didn't even know what names were. No, more than that, I wondered how he had managed to stay alive on its own all this time. Scary, everyone's scary. Hide, safe here. Always safe. As the boy told me this, he stuck a pendant he wore around his neck. Well, I'll be. Even though I couldn't use magecraft at the time, I could still tell that the boy was holding a mystic coat of concealment. What's more, it was an antique of incredible value. A talisman that has belonged to a sect of witches who have been living in England's deepest forest since even before the clock tower was founded. Now I see, that explains it. No wonder my assailants hadn't been able to find me. The rooms I'd been staying in was rendered almost completely invisible. You're right, there really is a treasure. I couldn't bring myself to ask the boy if his parents had left him the talisman or if he had discovered it for himself somewhere, but at least I understood his situation. It was the pendant that had enabled him to carry me here from the alley without being seen. It must have also been what enabled him to safely borrow fruit from nearby stores. I couldn't make up my mind whether his situation was encouraging or depressing. It was thanks to the pendant that the boy had been able to survive on his own all this time. But it was also thanks to the pendant that he'd never needed to become involved with anyone else. In a very real sense, he had slipped through the cracks of society. So unsure what to say to him, I ended up saying nothing. Hey, it's okay. It's pretty, treasure my treasure. The boy gave me a big smile while gently tucking the pendant away, never grasping my true intentions. Even thinking back on it now, it still makes my chest ache. Several more days passed and I made a number of new discoveries. Always saw you on a bridge, always I saw. That finally jogged my memory. The boy was a vagrant I'd seen when crossing the bridge. Always saw you, always. I never understand what I must have seemed like to him. No, I go further. I should never presume to think I could understand. All I can say is that, as far as he was concerned, I was someone he had seen crossing the bridge, and what was enough to him for help me. The boy may have been ignorant, but he wasn't stupid in his own way, and he understood the current situation too. For starters, he never once left the room. Some part of him understood that if he went outside, even with the pendant, there was a chance the people who attacked me would discover us. So for almost 2 weeks, he fed me using food he already had on hand. Food. What's wrong? Is there a problem? No. No problem. Safe here, safe. I see. Well, that's alright then. Even having grown accustomed to this environment, I was beyond exhausted. I still couldn't move my limbs, and my strength was no closer to returning. It was no surprise the food the boy was giving me had no nutrient value whatsoever. And while his pendant may have kept us safe from my assailants, it also kept us hidden from my allies. I sighed loudly in despair and closed my eyes. As I slept, I dreamed of my body rotting away like a decaying tree until I finally died. Er ist weg. Hallo? Hört's mal an. Wake up, wake up! It was the first time the boy had ever woken me up on his own accord. Hey, food! Eat it up, have lots! Is that? My voice all but broke in shameless excitement. In his hands, the boy was carrying a basket filled to the brim with bread. And not stale, moldy leftover bread like it had been giving me so far. This was bread that had clearly been freshly baked that morning. This is amazing, although it still does bad, huh? Don't misunderstand, I do appreciate that. But if you were good anyway, it would have been nice if you had gotten some other things too. Yeah, food, eat. I didn't realize until later why the boy had only had stale bread on hand. It was because for his entirety of his life, he had never known any other sort of meal. I didn't understand that back then, since mine had been a life of luxury. Unfortunately, there was something else I failed to notice too. Something much more important. Well, don't mind if I do. Yes, this is much easier to eat. It's great. The boy suddenly fell into the bed as if he tripped on a rock, his arms clenching on top of a nearby pillow. He looked just like a child, dozing off at the desk. The boy had always looked so malnourished that I hadn't even noticed how sunken his cheeks now were, or fresh bruises on his body. He'd been living alone all this time. Of course, he wouldn't have enough food on hand to feed 2 people for over 2 weeks. The only reason he had any at all was because nobody had stopped him from taking it, thanks to the pendant. The food he had on hand was only enough for one person, only enough for one to survive on his own. And ever since he'd taken me in, he'd not so much as set a foot outside. He knew that if he left with the pendant, this room would no longer be safe. So he left it in my bed to keep me safe. In an instant, it was clear as day what he had done to bring me more food. He must have been accosted and beaten over and over. And since he had barely eaten a thing ever since he took me in, the malnourished child simply could not endure such punishment. Treasure. Safe. No, he couldn't have. No one ever do something so absurd, so patiently foolish. He may have been ignorant, but he was smart. He would knowingly choose to do this. Still, on the bed, the boy looked at my face as I lay there, as through he was gazing at the stars. Pretty. No. Hang in there, please, you have to. So pretty. At the time, I wasn't overcome with grief or shock or anger. I was just done with my own stupidity. I was completely and utterly fed up with how foolish I had been to only look at the future, without seeing or relating to those I had previously treated as though they didn't exist. Create something beautiful. Born to be a king? A chosen genius? What a joke, no. Jokes are at least funny. I had no idea what I had been talking about. I brushed endlessly about creating beautiful things, blindly trusting that simply calling them beautiful was enough. I had not once stopped to think about what it was that I considered beautiful. The body value hadn't changed. He had wasted his life on something so foolish, so stupid as saving me. I was from the upper crust, and he was from the bottom of the barrel. That much was clear from what we were each bound to contribute to the world in the years to come. But still, could I do what he did? Could I risk my life solely to keep a perfect stranger from starving? Could I risk my life without receiving anything in return? All for something I felt was beautiful? Why, of course. I can do that. I roused my body from its long slumber, very literally burning my soul for energy. I could feel my magical circuits, a gift I had all my life up to that point, physically crumble away. Then, after paying that steep price, too little too late by then, I had every role the boy had brought me. That's right. If he could do it, then I had to do as well. Now that he had shown me what was possible, it was incumbent upon me to pay him back. For what he lacked in property, he more than made up for in benevolence. I need to set my sights higher. I need to be stronger than ever. I shamelessly shoved the food into my mouth, silently willing myself back to life. I had no time to regret of self-pity. No, I had a job to do, and I was determined to see it done. This was an entirely new motivation. I certainly wasn't born with these convictions. If my life had continued as planned, this new ideal would never have been even occurred to me. But now, I've vowed to dedicate my life to it. To take all the many gifts I was given, gifts that boy couldn't even dream of, and use them to demonstrate the value of human life for as long as my own lasts. Und am Ende hat das genau gemacht. Sein Leben gegeben für jemanden. After taking the full force of Kirishida's Wood's serum line, the foreign god disappeared from the sector of space. Whether she was forced to retreat due to injury or simply did so reflexively in response to the unexpected strike is still unclear. Regardless, her exit meant that Olympus would be spared immediately destruction, and left only the master and his servant behind in this palace. So much for that. In retrospect, I may have set my sights a bit too high. What the hell are you smiling about, you idiot? You look like a kid who just got caught with his hand in a candy jar. The servant knelt down beside the master, despite the insults, and continued coming. Painfully aware of how he would never walk again, now that the bottom half of his body had been obliterated. The master rested what remained of himself on the floor as it crumbled beneath him, and turned to look up at the sky. Damn, that searchlight was some serious shit. Ophelia didn't do anything even close to that. Well, this is how they were originally supposed to use. Director Marisbury told me that in confidence. He said that if things ever look truly bleak, I should use mines to save the world. No pressure, right? The master caught up so brightly and prettily as he spoke. He caught sounded like the rattling of dead branches. There was no more sign of the melodic spring-like lilt. Warte mal kurz. There was no more sign of a melodic spring-like lilt that had previously been a fixture of his voice. You don't say. And here I thought all of Chaldean's director were weak and pathetic. Sounds like this Marisbury punk was a hell of a guy. Never would have guessed. Yes, he was. I always did respect him, but he turned out to be far more capable than me. He may have been an avid scientist who only about his research, but he was also just as dangerous as you expect with one of the clock's tallest 12 lords to be. The master laughed, acknowledging his defeat. There was no trace of regret in his voice. I must admit, I never would have guessed that you would cooperating so willingly with Chaldea. I was so shocked I spilled my tea when I heard you joined their side just like that. I thought that would have taken considerably longer. Part of me was even a bit jealous. For a moment, I wonder if it meant you joined anyone who defeated you. Hey, it wasn't just like that. And they never defeated me. That was all because Poseidon messed up. What convinced you? I guess it was Chaldea's leader asking me about you. Said he wanted to know what Kirishima was like now. Not as a mage, but as a person. I think that was the big reason I helped them out this long. Well, that doesn't sound very worth your while. You have been helping them all this time without anything in return. Who said I didn't get anything of it? Each time I had him tell me a shit of stories about you from your clock tower days. Huh. Some born champion you turned out to be. Turns out you were nothing but an only cautious, stubborn as hell coward. Guess both the dears Cody and Ophelia were completely wrong about you all along. The servant laughed joyously. It wasn't laughter meant to mock them once who had misunderstood the master. It was meant to commend him for keeping up such a perfect front for so long. The master looked up at the servant when he heard the laughter, squinting as if they were too bright to look up. His eyesight had clouded over, and his breathing was already sharp and shallow. Hey, what about you? You got still anything still want to say? Or something you still want to do? Go on, let me hear it. I'll at least do that much for you. Something I still want to do, huh? And so, one small piece at a time, the master told his servant about what-ifs. He explained how each scripter was required to have an accomplishment worthy to overturn death. Bring them back to life. So the foreign god created environments, custom and subjective worlds. Worlds that would let the dead cryptors achieve such a thing. The masters was then shifted to these worlds that might have been, yet were never meant to be. And from there, he, his fellow cryptors, undertook a journey to restore humanity. Damn, seriously? So what? You saved the world with them? Only as part of a simulation. They were nothing compared to the real singularities. Kadoc and I came to trust each other. Ophelia and I shared a laugh with each other. Akuta and I helped each other. Beryl and I disagreed with each other. Pepe must have saved me dozens of times. Aru may seem frivolous, but he has a strong sense of integrity. I really enjoy getting to understand them better, getting to know their lives. But all this time... Es geht nicht. Entschuldigung, liebe Leute, aber das trifft mich irgendwie sehr hart. But all the time the master spent with his teammates was no more than a dream. An illusion that was broken the moment his accomplishment was complete. Now the only one in the whole world who remembered their trying but important journeys was the master himself. And you still treated them like that? What, is your heart made of stone or something? What else could I do? If I told them, they wouldn't know what to make of it. So I just kept it all to myself, like any other dream. More precisely, he looked at the experience away so he would never look at them again, to make sure that regardless of what happened, they would never fade away. A journey to restore humanity, huh? They may not be the best way to put it. But if it were all possible, I really wanted to save the world. With everyone in teammate together. The master truly loved his teammate. Not as their leader, but as their friend. They're the same, the servant thought bitterly. This master, and Chaldea's master, were in the exact same position. As his breathing slows, one last thought fits across the master's mind like a shooting star in the night sky. The hell were you thinking, idiot? You didn't have to try so hard to be all by yourself. I'm glad to hear you say that, Canis, but you're wrong. I was never all by myself. All humans are trying to do their best. Like the hell they are. Don't you try to pull that shit at me, Kirishida. There's no answer. His soul is already gone. The servants turned toward the sky though, watching a bird fly away, never to return. Mistakes flood the servant's mind. Unquenchable hatred pounded the servant's heart. The servant wasn't about to reject the past or previous action. The pride his heroic spirit held refused to sully the very nature of a hero. After all, the servant had been the one who laughed at the world of humans, the one who mocked and wreaked havoc upon it. That aspect could never change. The servant was well aware they were a villain who hated humans, despised gods, shunned what was right, had embraced what was wrong. But even so, in spite of all that, damn it! I'm the idiot. Even if everything about him was evil. She remembered what she was meant to protect, even as she regretted failing to do so. She took up the spear of lightning, and a golden bird took flight. His next action would not be for his own glory, but to show not that she was indeed the right heroic spirit for his master. Also, ich glaube, man hat's gehört. Außer, dass mir hier die Tränen runterfallen und ich es nicht aufhören kann, ist mir halt ein bisschen die Sprache verschlagen. Also Leute, wenn jemals Kirshidas Servant kommt, dann müssen wir ihn rollen. Was soll man dazu sagen, Mann? Der Master, der hätte ebenso verdient gehabt wie wir. Ein auserwählter König, der gemerkt hat, dass alles Auserwählte nichts wert ist. Der Menschheit das einen Fortbestand geben wollte. Der alles gegeben hat, sein Leben und alles. Der eigentlich am Ende auch nur, wie wir, Abenteuer mit unseren Freunden und Lieben haben wollten. Und auch wenn es ihm nie gegönnt würde. Ja. Was, Leute, Mann, es geht nicht mehr. Ich glaube, ich erhole mich jetzt ein bisschen. Und beim nächsten Mal werden wir uns dann zum finalen Battle des 5. Olympus widmen. Haut rein, liebe Leute. Und definitiv, Kirishida hat es verdient, dass man ihm nachweint. Haut rein und bis zum nächsten Mal. Auf Wiedersehen. Ciao.